Okay, although I have gotten this machine MIDI or machine running in MIDI mode to be recognized by my MIDI in object in MaxMSP um, yesterday or a few days ago. Today or yesterday and today, like I'm still having trouble to consistently get it to work. In fact, I've when I load everything up on my Mac computer rather than the other Mac computer, it actually I've never gotten it to work on this one. So it was actually kind of like a miracle that it even worked the other day, given all the times I've tried to make it work. So um, I guess you could say, although it worked yesterday, it's fickle. And in fact, on this computer, it just doesn't work. So I've slowed down a little bit and re-looked at the problem, and I'm just gonna read um, what 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 I've come up with. I've posted this on the Native Instruments forum and on the MaxMSP forum because I think the I really need someone who understands Maschine and MaxMSP to really successfully make this work. Um, so but I'm also going to post it here on YouTube, and in the next few videos, I'm just going to kind of break it down a little more slower so I can show on a screen uh, image exactly what the problem is. So here I go. If Here's my question. It's basically about problems getting MaxMSP to receive MIDI data from a machine. Um, my basic question is if a MIDI in object in MaxMSP recognizes Maschine Controller MIDI input port 0, in the sense that I am able to select it when my patch in MaxMSP is in lock mode, what else do I need to do to get my MaxMSP patch to successfully receive MIDI information from my machine when my machine is running in MIDI mode? When I attach a print object to the output of my midiin object, my Max window shows that no information is being received, yet at the same time I can turn on different MIDI ports in my machine, and my MIDI in object in MaxMSP will recognize them. So let me just explain that a little better. So in MaxMSP, there's probably lots of different objects that recognize MIDI inputs, but the one I've used successfully the other day is MIDI in. It's like, I guess it's the probably the most basic MIDI in object that you can use. And if you hook it up to um, when I open the tutorial, sorry, if you hook up a MIDI in object to a print object, you can see if the MIDI in object is receiving information in your Max window, which is the window that it shows you what's being printed if you hook a print thing up to it, so you can diagnose where your issue lies. And so the other day when I hooked this up, I hooked up the print window to the MIDI in object. Uh, it gave all this information, and it gives a ton of information. If you read the first MIDI in the MaxMSP tutorials in the MaxMSP program, it basically says that if it's working, this is what it will do, and you can hook up the print object to your MIDI input port and see how it's working. So yesterday I did that with the machine running in, or a few days ago, and that's what I made the last video on. When you press Shift Control and put it in MIDI mode, I actually was pressing down the machine, like pads in the machine, and it would like start and stop the video. It was really cool. It would like it would continue playing it from where I stopped it, and like, so it was interesting what it was doing. And from that, that's when I hooked up. From knowing that it worked, when I hooked it up to the midiin object and put um, in this tutorial, because you can I then um, put a midiin object into my jitter patch that I had made, and hooked up the MIDI, what did I say, Maschine Controller MIDI input port 0. I selected that, and it worked, and I was controlling video via MIDI. And so ultimately what I'm trying to do is I would like to I would like to use the Maschine as a sampler and send the MIDI information that is being sampled to I want to send that to my MIDI to MaxMSP, my MIDI patches in there to control the video. So that's kind of where I'm headed. So it's kind of a complex question, so I'm going to read this next paragraph. It kind of explains why it's so difficult. I realize that it is a challenging question because there are at least 6 different places that the functionality of MIDI can be modified, i.e. 1, the MIDI input object in a MaxMSP patch, 2, the preferences in MaxMSP software, 3, the audio MIDI setup in Mac OS X 10.6 operating system, which is the operating system that I'm using, 4, the software of Maschine, 5, the preferences of the software of Maschine, and 6, in the hardware of Maschine when it is running in MIDI mode. As I understand it, if any of the settings in any one of these 6 places is incorrectly configured, MIDI will not be received in the MIDI in object in MaxMSP, or at least that's what I'm guessing. I should say. What I'm understanding is that if something in these 6 different preferences, if something is off and they're not speaking to each other correctly, what's going to happen is that I'm going to have this fickle system. So at least that's what I'm assuming. So I'm assuming that nothing is wrong with my software in these 6 instances, and nothing, and that some of the way I have the software set up or the hardware in the machine is not configured correctly so that it understands. And randomly yesterday it did. So I'm not sure why it's being fickle, but I'm assuming that there is something tangible that I can, and physical, that I can adjust and make this work, which might be an incorrect assumption. There may be one of my other fears, well, I don't know, fears or worries, is that the Maschine, what is it called? The audio MIDI setup in Mac OS 10.6. There's something wrong with that, because when I read the tutorials in the MIDI setup for my Mac OS, it refers more to the previous audio MIDI setup in Mac OS, like 10.5 or 10.4 or whatever, maybe 10.0. But so when I research audio MIDI setup on the internet, I will see in the way it talks about the MIDI setup, the audio MIDI setup in Mac OS 10.6.3 is actually referring to a previous software setup. So I hope that makes sense, because it's kind of complex. So the information when I go to help in my audio MIDI setup in Mac OS X 10.6.3 is actually referring to the previous audio MIDI setup. It's like getting a new camera and getting the old manual for it.